I'm that kind of guy where people are like, "Can you do this?" And I'm like, "Yes." And it sounds kind of weird, but I the way I operate, the way my brain works is like if I don't know how to do it and I'm interested in it, I'll learn how to go and do it.
Hey everyone, what if you realize that what you think you want in terms of a career in music is actually not what you want or are no longer willing to do? What does it mean for your life as it pertains to music at that point? In the case of my guest today, Alex Karjaka, it means taking what you have learned, the skills, the drive, the discipline to succeed in music, and use those skills to work in the completely different medium of photography. Alex is a New York City musician and photographer. Some of his clients include Amazon, Carnegie Hall, Yamaha, and countless portraits of musicians and artists. He's on faculty at Parsons School of Design and hosts the YouTube channel Karjaka with Coffee. It was a great pleasure for me to chat with him, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. Thanks for dropping by.
So when I was 12, I started a landscaping construction business in my neighborhood. Like I started off with like a couple like neighbor clients like doing like they'd ask like, can you do our lawn or can you do our bushes? And I'd never done any of that. And I went, yes, I can do this. And or can you paint our garage or you can paint our house and can you do like, and then suddenly it was just like it was yes, and it was like just a series of like falling forward, like face planting all the time, like just learning on the job. Okay, this worked, this didn't work. And honestly, that's been my life for the last probably 20 or 30 years. It's just a series of like, I don't know, but with landscaping, with photography, with art, like I
Do you
have,
still have a landscaping business?
well, I mean, eventually I did sell that like when I was in my mid 20s to like one of the guys I was working with at the
You
time.
for real had a like this isn't a
Oh,
kid
yeah.
kid operation. This is
Well, it was the like so I would it was like when I was in high school, like throughout middle school and high school, and then when I went to college, I would come back and during the summers I had to make like I had to buy clarinets, and I'm like, okay, so I was a bartender at a country club, and well, I was also doing landscaping construction during that time, and I had a couple guys like working with me, and we people would be like, okay, we want to do like this kind of landscape architecture. We want to put in rose bushes. We want to do this, or we need the gutters done, this, that, or we need the house painted, or a variety of things. And it was always just like, oh yeah, we can do it. Meanwhile, like this was like late 90s, early 2000s, no YouTube.
yeah.
So it's just that kind of like my father had a couple books. I would like talk to my father about it, go to the library and learn about it, or just being like, okay, like just on the job training. And like, I think it was kind of the catalyst for eventually when I moved out to New York of just being like to answer your question, like, so what do I do? Who am I? It's like, I would like, I think we're artists, It's just like, I know that you're a saxophonist, but you also do everything underneath the sun, like including this fantastic podcast. I'm of the philosophy of like Oscar Wilde that talks about like like not so much about putting labels about who we are, but like we're in a space of like being all the time. So like you're being an artist, or it's just like I'm whatever the world, the universe requires of me of that day.
Some of your proudest artistic moments or things that you've done.
This will sound kind of corny, but it's just like I love like so I'm a commercial photographer, right? I'm a professional clarinetist, bass clarinetist. And like I have this small magazine, Karjaka, New York, and I've got a variety of other projects endeavors. Like I the it's I like so I've played at the Met. I've toured China with a variety of groups. I've been on like recording sessions and commercials on TV, etc. And at the end of the day, I my proudest things are the small projects, the little projects, the ones that like make no money, or that people come and they want to work with me, but they're like, look, I know, like it's that like we're getting things off the ground. We want to try something, like, and we know who you are. We've been recommended, like whether it's for music, photography, graphic design, all this. So it's like it doesn't matter what the project is or who the like. The proudest thing is like when I can just have that kind of not not to sound altruistic, but like that impact where it's just like I can like push like more startups, more babies, like what like into the world. If I can be help in any part of that process, like that first decade, because then it's just downhill from there. It's just
Internet.
so I went to Michigan State for a music ed degree
Okay.
in clarinet, and I studied with Caroline Hartig.
Okay.
I did 1 year at Ball State in Muncie, Indiana,
Mm.
and then when she got a new job at Michigan State.
Oh, and she brought you.
Well, she did, and I thank God every day for that because I probably wouldn't be here in New York now.
Mm.
Not to say that I couldn't have gotten out of Muncie, but it wasn't even like at the time, and thank God my parents were able to help me and I was able to make some things and move around. But it turned into like following her, I went from paying like 2,000 a year at Ball State back in 2003, 2004 to 27,000 a year.
Mm.
Now compare that to my students at Parsons pay almost 75,000
Oh
a
yeah,
year.
it's crazy. Yeah.
So I thought, oh, 27,000, that's so much money. And in today's world, people are like, I would kill to pay 27,000,
Yeah, yeah.
student under 100, thousand loan debt. So that being said, what happened was I followed her and I think I got through 3 years at Michigan State in the ed program, and I knew I wanted to go on as a professional, like clarinetist, bass
Mm.
clarinetist. Even though, like, I would go into lessons and she'd be like, "Are you sure you want to stay a clarinetist? Like, you sure you don't want to be like a music teacher? Or you're really good at music business and you're good at business
Mm.
and people. Maybe you do like maybe you don't go into performance." And that really builds your spirit to be like, oh my God, I should be a clarinetist. Because at the end of the day, it's just like, I'm going to prove her wrong, or I'm going to try some different things. I was I was looking through this like a couple years ago, but in my clarinet journal at Michigan State, like you had like your 5 year and your 10 year, and like
Do you write down goals like that?
at the time I did
Yeah.
because that was part of our class.
Oh, okay.
And I found that I think this was in 2006. In 2006, I had written down for Dr. Hardig, I had written down like I'm going to go to New York and I'm going to be a freelance bass clarinetist, like doubler in New York. I'm going to go and do that. So after I started taking a couple lessons with Mike Lowenstern, my last semester and a half at Bowling Green, just to start networking. And Mike was like, "You should audition for me over at Manhattan School of Music." And I was just like, "Giddy up," because like I'm a good clarinetist. I'm a better bass clarinetist, but I'm also like I'm not on the level of like Michael Lowenstern or Kevin Schenfer or Caroline Hart. I stay with these legends like Ted Owen on clarinet, and I knew like, okay, like I have some natural talent, some natural gifts, and I'm gonna practice really hard. But but my level of practicing was only marginally going to get better. Like I also there was a realism to like where I could go and what I wanted to do. And so my whole operation, how I look at life is like most people like going through like the front door. You've got people, everybody's lined up through the front door, and I love a side door or a back door entrance. Like I'm like, who are the connections? How do I make this work where I don't have to go? If I can skip the formal process and work around, I'm going to do that because I've been doing that since I was a teenager, working that landscaping business. So taking lessons with Mike seemed to like I knew Mike taught at a variety of schools and he was insulated in New York. And so I'm like, okay, so how do I get there? So I take lessons with Mike. I take an audition at Manhattan School. They accepted me probably on the good grace of Mike. And I was there. I was there for 1 semester before I withdrew. And I loved it was a great 1 semester. And then I audited classes for free another semester. So part of the reason why I withdrew is just because I'd gone through 7 years, like a 5 year music ed degree, 2 years of my first master's with Kevin Schempf. And I tell this story to my students at Parsons, which was like one of the mistakes that people make when they move out to New York is they're like, there's no infrastructure, there's no network. They're just like, I came, I put my flag down, and like bring on the work, bring on the gigs.
Mm-hmm.
And my whole thought process about like just studying with Mike and getting into Manhattan School was also like, I can network, I can meet musicians,
Sure, yeah.
I can play, I can start building out a community to be a part of. I had wonderful professors at Manhattan School, but at the end of the day, the landscape construction kid comes out and goes, how much is this going to help me build? Because like 1 semester at Manhattan School cost me 22,000. So okay, so I'm going to spend almost over 80,000 over 4 semesters. And is that like, am I going to be able to get out of that hole? And I don't have rich parents or rich family and whatnot. I kind of just bootstrap it, kind of be like, okay, we're gonna make this work, get by the skin of your teeth. And so after one semester, I'm like, am I gonna get really another $66,000 worth of education? So I remember, so I called up my mother. It was the second week in November. You know, it was like 10 days before Thanksgiving. And I just talked with one of my counselors had pulled me aside, and she goes, "So, do you stopped going to a couple classes? What's the story on that?" And I was telling her, I'm like, I basically broke down and said, like, look, I think I'm gonna fail out, and that's nothing like because I didn't know with withdrawal it was a. She's like, well, don't do that.
Yeah.
She's like, if you ever go on for the DMA or the PhD, that'll be on your record. And I said, she's like, so what? I said, so what's a withdrawal? And she's just like, we should do it today. We should do it like right now.
Yeah.
So
You just pay the money, and
yeah, I spent $22,000 for a W on my transcript
right.
from Michigan
Yeah.
Manhattan School.
Well, it's a smart W though.
It's a smart W, and I called up my folks. I called up my mother, and I left her. I think I left her a voicemail saying like it is done. Like
Yeah.
like I had quoted like the Bhagavad Gita, like saying like I basically destroyed. Like I'm like it is done. I'm out. What's that saying from the fire into the frying pan?
Did that feel traumatic at the time to do that?
I don't think I had the time to have it. You know, you have that gut feeling. You got like when you like when something's not working or something is working, you start listening to your gut.
Something in your subconscious is telling you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We go on stage, we get butterflies because we're excited and nervous and all this stuff. But I was getting the opposite, where it's like I wasn't having an ulcer, I was just having my stomach lining being eaten away from the inside.
Something was wrong. Oh, that's... I heard you mention that your dad was a photographer.
So my father went to film school at Columbia College in Chicago. At the time, Columbia College in the early 70s, like late 60s, early 70s, wasn't the school that it is now on Michigan Ave. It was a smaller program, and he studied with like Roger Ebert and a couple other learned how did photography, film, framing, director of photography work, and basically like other kids had like normal upbringings of like throwing the football around or baseball, and my father would be like, Alex, my son, I love you. At the park, right? This is the story of like how I got into photography.
He's Ukrainian?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, came like his long story short, came over after World War II with his family. They escaped slave labor camps and eventually make their way to Chicago. And they get in. My father learns English, teaches his family how to speak English, and kind of raises everybody up. Cut to going to college, learning that, and then eventually having meeting my mom, and then eventually it turned into like my father. I had a like my father had a landscaping construction business. He had more of a construction business when I was growing up, which worked like evenings and weekends. And so during the day, he kind of took care of us while my mother worked in project management and finance. And so my father he took all of his college training and knowledge and just, for better or for worse, kind of, I don't want to say dumped, but like illuminated my sister and I in the sense that we would go to the park and just count squirrels and observe the landscape. And he'd be like, Alex, my son, I love you. Tell me what you see. Like, and we'd set up these stories, right? Like, you're learning how to frame your eye differently. And then we would talk about the different stories and be like, where's the story? Like, where's the story? And shapes like how I felt it. Like, here we are. Like my career is basically an homage to him in the sense, and both my parents, because they helped me build my eye. My first camera I got, I would think I was like 11. This little Argus Casino 35 millimeter film, because digital still wasn't big yet. And he said, okay, here's the camera, go. He barely taught me how to put the film in the canister, but he didn't teach me how to really dial in the camera and like, because he wanted me to explore with that, like learn how the f-stop works, the lens focal lengths work, learn how the shutter works, learn all this stuff, and then you start learning how to develop your own style, your own skills with it. My father just kind of pushed me out of the nest like a baby bird, and I 100 rolls later was just finally taking one good photograph. His thought process was like, and I still use this to this day, especially with my students at Parsons, was if you have 3 rolls of film, like basically 100 frames, if you get like one great photograph or 2 or 3 good photographs coming out of 100 frames, you're doing really well. And so my thought process growing up was like, I have 36 exposures in a roll. I'm like, I want my one photograph. In in undergrad, I was still taking photographs. I had a couple like garage sale like 35 millimeter cameras. My father hadn't like he gave me his Nikon F from 1974, 1973, F Atomic, and with a beautiful 120 lens, but I wasn't taking that to school with me, like to Michigan State, so somebody could steal it.
Mm.
So, but when I got older, I started playing more with that. I was taking more photographs, and I love formal training. Like we're musicians. Like we you can't. I've never seen the case where like somebody in their mid 20s just like wakes up one day and says like I'm going to become like at our level of musician without going through major formal training. You're not like I just watched a bunch of YouTube and I learned how to play saxophone and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like
right.
and now I'm playing with Winton. It's just like it's not. But with photography to a certain extent, like you can get 50% on like just I have the camera, like whether it's film or digital, hopefully film, and you're learning YouTube. Okay, like I know. Okay, I put the lens in like this, or the lens goes on like this, the film goes like this, and just
Mm.
trying. It is it's more user friendly than an instrument. You're not learning Rachmaninoff at 30 and then you're going to be like on tour at 40.
The art of music is there's a barrier to entry, right?
Yeah.
Um, it seems like your mom also was like 50% of this
Yeah.
entrepreneurship mentality. Can you talk about her?
Yeah. So my mother I mean, they're both retired now, enjoying life and listening to all my antics with the business. For her, like, so project management in the 70s, 80s, and 90s wasn't the project management world that we had. Like, you could get degrees in project management in today's world. It wasn't a degree. It was just like, okay, we have these projects. She would go into different variety of different finance world jobs, eventually like settling down at the Northern Trust and working on a variety of different projects and creating her own projects within the banking world. And so she she took all that knowledge as we were growing up and I synthesized it. Okay, like this is like I started working like the landscaping business, or I was like a mixologist for 5 years, or I had this small like little limousine business for a little bit, like, and then coming out to New York. And it was always like she's always been my consigliere, like my right hand, talking. Like I was on the phone with her for 90 minutes talking business last night. I'm turning 39 and she is however old she is. She'd hate me if I told her how old this thing. But she's at retirement age, and we're having these 90-minute conversations about business
Mm-hmm.
over the span of her career and stuff where I'm learning on a daily basis still new things after 30 some odd years of asking these questions,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like it's invaluable because you learn how she taught me like how to anticipate people, like my father the philosopher, and then my mother the Italian, the Roman, just being like, okay, anticipate, like think these 5 steps always. And so you learn the chess game of life.
What are those 5 steps?
Well, it depends on what the scenario
Oh,
is
okay.
like, but whether you're on a photo shoot of music, music gig, or you're working, everything is a series of project management. Like this, like what we're doing right now, there was project management in order to get everything organized. And granted, this is definitely a smaller thing as opposed to a Fortune 500 company. But if you life is not as scattered as we tend to make it if you just kind of be pragmatic about things and break it down. But we tend to be like, I'm going to put this thing off the side. I'm not going to deal with it, even though this is something that needs to be dealt with, or this is what this like here of a variety of options of how these people are thinking, or this is what the marketplace is about to do, or have you considered this or that? And I'm just scratching the surface of potential based off of my upbringing with her.
Um, do you ever find it mentally draining or just a weird mental space to be working in 2 different mediums?
I look at it this way, like I've never really had I've never had a salaried position in my entire life. Like I've been building businesses since 12,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. So the idea is like I'm preconditioned to juggle. Like that's the beautiful thing about music is you're juggling so much your music versus the people that are playing around you, what the conductor wants, what's going on stage behind you, and the different like the air changes and suddenly everybody goes out of tune and we're trying to you're juggling a lot. I think that's the beautiful thing is like for me that kind of training, that music training translated well to life in a sense because now you're taking those same skills and kind of modifying them to be like, okay, like how do I manage all these different things? And for my brain, for better or for worse, I like my I'm on. Like
Yeah.
I'm on for like 14 to
You're
16
just
hours.
comfortable, like with the amount of balls in the air, so to speak.
You have well, it's like I have no, it's like when Cortez came over to the New World, right? Like he burned his ships. So there was no going back to Spain, right? And everybody was well motivated to keep moving forward.
Hmm.
Get off the boat. Get out. So it's like I have in the same way like I have no choice. You have to be okay with not knowing. Like there's not always a plan. Like you can have general ideas of plans. There are a variety of unknowns, and you have to be okay with like I like when you especially when you're first starting out and you come to me like I don't know where the money's coming from or the opportunities or the gigs or how we're gonna make it, and you have to be okay with that because it all works out. But they say there's a saying like with every I forget what culture it comes from, but like with every child that you have, there's a loaf of bread that comes along with the baby that's born. Meaning they're like you're going to you always find the money, you find the food, you find the way to keep that baby that and like for me, the business and art is my baby. Like you find a way to keep that business alive.
Hmm.
There's something.
What do you notice or do you observe that's the same between the medium of photography and the medium of music?
But I would say no. I mean, there's similar. There are a lot of similarities, obviously.
Hmm.
I mean, but the core being like you have to practice. It's interesting in today's world with the younger generations. Like I've been at Parsons over 5 years now, and I have to ask my students to practice. And like by practice, I mean, did you take photos today? Did like no? Why didn't you take photos? Like will you take photos tomorrow? Well, maybe it's like the physical act of putting the horn or the camera to your eye and not taking like I'm walking like with an iPhone or like I'm gonna take your photograph a little later, but I got this
Oh, cool.
this stupid
What is that?
expensive camera,
Oh, it's a Leica.
little like digital Leica, right?
A stupid little camera. I
Stupid.
know how much those are.
I know exactly, and I paid way too much for it, and I do love it. And at some point, I'll probably sell it. But like, I bought this right before COVID, and who knew this was like life was a lot different. But all this to say is just like, did you put this up to your eye, right?
Mm.
Versus like, I'm gonna take like a lot of my students, they're taking photographs like this, and they're trying this, and that's great. Maybe if you're doing, your motion work,
Hmm.
but like, I'm a stickler for like, look, you have a viewfinder, like, I mean, this is a rangefinder, so you've got this, but if
Hmm.
you're looking through the lens with like an SLR, like a single lens reflex, like this is a different experience and like being here and then being with your client or your subject like that. The same thing about having my clarinet like right here. Like I can't it's a personal experience. The only difference like and this is not like diminishing my skills as a photographer, but the only difference between you and me as a photographer is that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours bit. If you just take photographs, you're going to be a better photographer. You're like you're going to be more and more inclined. You'll take better photographs all the time. Like you're in search of that one photo. Like I haven't taken my best photograph yet. I'm in search of it, and I get closer every day. And who I may or may not get that photograph by the time I die, but it's not really about that. For me, it's just like it's that path in what I can do while taking that photograph working with people. But the same way where it's just like you're looking for the perfect sound, the perfect phrase, the perfect moment.
I also, you touched on something that I really like to think about, and I tell this to students too, is as a musician, you think there's so much mystery or like, will I get good? And I like to think of it as like, it's just numbers. If
Yeah.
you do this for 7 hours, you're going to be 7 hours better.
Yeah.
And you do that for a week, well, imagine you're going to be, and you just have to keep doing that, and
Mm.
it's inevitable. So there's no, you can let all that stress go because it's just a numbers game. And if you put the numbers in, it
Yeah.
it goes up. If you
And
don't put the numbers in, it doesn't.
exactly.
No.
it's when people like you ever hear that's people failing forward and whatnot. Now I'm nearly 40 years old and I'm still getting photo like rolls back that were bad, like that how like rolls of film like 35 or 120 that I'm like, oh, I didn't get it. I didn't get that moment. Or like when I do photo shoots, like where I think the focus is in or the lighting was good when I was looking through the viewfinder or when I was looking through the monitor, but I missed this. And I'm uh, like it's you can recover it, you can make it better. Think about it's that whole thing where people are like, you'll never remember like all the great moments, but you'll remember all the negatives, right? Because that's how like we
That's how you get
expand.
better. Yeah.
So I left Manhattan School of Music, right? And I had like I sold my car in Indiana. My parents had sold that, sent me the cash, and I bought a couple. I bought a lens, a camera, a Nikon, and digital. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go out and become a photographer and start capitalizing on my market, which was musicians, because I knew that I could make a transition into the music like music photo world, just like not unlike what actors do when they're like, I can do headshots too. I have to get in photography out here. How do I do this? But then it was like, all right, wedding photographers. Like if you want to be a photographer and you've never done anything before, like this is a piece of gold that I'm about to say. Is like become like assist on a wedding photo shoot. Like you're gonna make $50 if any dollar. So what I did was I Googled photographers in New York and I got all these wedding photographers immediately. And I cold emailed 20 people and I got no response from like the first 14 or 15. I got two responses, which were like, thank you so much, I'll put your name on file. And as my mother will know, like, I can't eat the file. So I'm going to keep moving on. And then the next email was from Autumn Lynn, who she had at the time she had this wedding business, this profitable wedding business. She had lost a couple assistants, and she said, "Listen, I've lost my assistants. If you want to come over for an interview, like," and I brought my music resume to a photo interview, which I don't know how awkward that was. In my best suit, I borrowed a friend's like Rolex watch, like, and I was just like, I'm going there, I'm looking fantastic. This was over at the Frank Gehry building down in Water Street. I'm like,
Okay.
oh my God, I'm going to her studio. It was the lobby. And I met her. I brought my music resume to this photo audition, basically. And she's like, I've got 3 weddings this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Do you want to assist me? I'll give you a camera, like, and you take photographs and you like start learning that way. She took a total chance on me, and I did the wedding circuit for like 5 or 6 years.
Hmm.
Like, here's the thing about wedding photography. Like, again, if you have any, like, if you said, I want to become a photographer, but I don't know what I want to do. I don't like, I haven't found my niche or like what my soul says as a photographer. When you're in wedding photography, you're doing event photography, you're doing portraits, beauty, you're doing detail work with the rings, you're doing landscape, you're doing interior, you're doing every style of photography, editorial, you're doing every style of photography known to man in an 8 to 12 hour shift. And you learn really quick what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you like doing but are bad at, and what you like at that you're good at, and all the bad things. Like on top of it, we're like, oh, do I want to know more about this? And that's why like you're making $0, like you're making 50 bucks. For me, I think I was making like $100 as a third assistant for her. She had two other photographers ahead of me that were doing, and I was a sponge. And I would like I so I you'd work 15 hours, then you get back and your feet are killing, your body's dying inside because it's the summer on top of it. And then you're like, okay, I gotta wake up and I'm gonna go do that again because it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday weddings for 6 months straight. And you learn how to kill your body and how to recover quickly and learn how to take all those photographs. And by the time 2015, 16 hit, I was just like, well, I've been doing enough. I was shooting photography for Carnegie Hall. I did some work for Manhattan School of Music. I was doing portraits. I was building out my portrait studio with studio lighting. I really kind of coming to grips with like, is this what I want to do? Is this where I want to go? But that's like the same thing with clarinet. It's like I came out here doing the like I in my at Bowling Green we'd done a lot of contemporary music because Bowling Green is a very contemporary music school. But I also loved, I love Brahms and Bach and Beethoven and all that. And so learning, like I had to come to grips with like I'm not going to be the contemporary bass clarinet of New York. Like New York, like you got too many mini Mike Lowensterns running around that are fantastic at it, and that's what they do. But I'm never going to be David Schifrin, like as a clarinetist or bass clarinet. I'm never going to be Mike Lowenstern, in front of an orchestra with a bass clarinet. To answer your question, basically, I know we've gone along. Like, don't pigeonhole yourself as like I have to do this, I have to be this person. I get so tired of hearing this. Like, it's like not until like 20 years later people realize like, oh, I can do whatever I want. It's like I have to listen to the marketplace. No, if you want to do it, go out and do it. It's gonna be hard. You might not know how to do it, or there's no direct path. Like there are no rules. There's no set pathway, which is liberating and constricting.
Mhm. Can you tell us a little bit about how day to day kind of like your studio runs, your photography studio?
Every day I'm either on the phone at least with like one international place, where like this morning I was on the phone with Colombia for 3 hours looking at production with my friend Valentina. But like I'm gonna be in LA in the first week in February, so I'm like looking at work over there, and I've got art dealers in London that I'm working with, and I have a client in Japan that I'm working with, and Chicago, and all these. So it's like I'm usually in the morning, like I'm looking at. So I get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock most mornings, and I go to bed at like 9:30, like most nights, 10 o'clock. I know, unless like I've got a gig or I've got to meet people, but I'm one of those crazy people that like I like getting a ton of work done before everybody else because it's quiet.
Mm.
Looking for new clients, marketing, like doing emails, doing social media, and then doing the meals and the networking and the all the you have to do the FaceTime. So if I do a photo shoot, like if it's a photo shoot, like I try to do two or three photo shoot days a week if I can, or it's usually like two clients or like a test shoot or something like this. But and so basically you have different catalogs that you dump all the raw files into. They say that what they were like over that period of like an hour, I took like 300 photographs. That's for me, that's too many probably, but we're trying different things. Or I now have to then cull those, like all the photos that like the exposure is
Hmm.
bad, and suddenly it's within like I don't use Lightroom anymore, but it's like you use a program like Adobe Raw, or I use Capture One, where in Capture One you're systematically culling out everything that is not the one, right? Is
Mm.
or that your batch. I know what I like as a photographer, and I like if it were up to me, I'd be like, this is your best photo, and
Mm.
this is because it's what I like. But I've learned over the years that it's like what I think is going to be the best photograph, 9 times out of 10 will not get chosen.
Mm.
My stuff, I'm
Oh,
like, oh my God,
interesting.
the lighting, the expression, and all this. But you're gonna see something where you're like, I don't like what my eye's doing, or hang on, like my thing, like I got this weird thing, or I got the smirk. It's like, and I'm like, oh, but this is all amazing. Nobody sees any of it, and
That's
you like,
maybe frustrating for you.
it's the best and worst because when I was first starting off, and especially in film, you're like, oh my God, this is the culmination of light. Look at this. I mean, this is perfect Rembrandt lighting. Have you seen this? All this stuff
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's just like you could have garbage light, but if the expression or the moment's there perfectly, they'll choose like everybody will choose garbage light over. And so you have to, as an artist, you have to rectify that. It's like even being in a recording session where it's just like they take the take that you're 90% instead of 100%, but
Hmm.
as an aggregate everybody was like 100%.
You gotta live with that.
You got to live with that. And so I cull down the photos to a handful of photos, and then everybody chooses what they want. And then for me, for my portfolio of photos, I'm like, okay, we're going to use these for the website, we're going to use this for that, we're going to use this. And she and I are
How did we get from wedding photographer to what's happening today? Can you trace that line for
so
us?
I bought my first medium format camera, which is this Hasselblad, and I think it was 2016. And I was at that point where I was assisting a couple photographers, but I hadn't gone the full assisting other photographers in studio work, and so I was doing a little bit more of assisting. I was trying different things. My first studio was the living room of my apartment in Queens. Basically, my bedroom was this, which was a makeup and hair studio, and in the living room, I had just a permanent white background or color background, and I was just like, I'm gonna get portfolio. I'm gonna do test shoots all the time, like doing portraits and beauty work and explore and test all that stuff. So much that I had so many photos to edit, I was like becoming overwhelmed. My my kitchen was this production like storage space. And so if you didn't know that somebody lived here professionally, you'd be like, oh, this is a apartment photo set. I was just manifesting more portrait work and I was doing more advertising. Here's the thing about like, especially with any visual artist, is like you think people know what you're doing, like because I put up 4 or 5 photos. Oh, people understand. Like, no, you have to more. You have to beat it into people's brains. It's like I'm here to do this. It's like 7 or 8 emails before somebody sees like, oh, Alex is doing this, they're doing that. It's that barrage of like I have clients that like call me after 6 or 7 years and be like, I've been following you for the last decade or 6 or 7 years or whatever, and I've loved your work and I've always wanted to work with you, and now they're ready. And that's what started happening out of 2015, 2016, where I just
Tell me about Karjaka Coffee.
in today's world, you have to be like multifaceted, like even more so, in order to stay with the pivoting marketplace. So my thought process was like, I'm not going to like. There are these legendary, like you go on YouTube and you study, ask for photo. There are photographers that are way better than me that have 1,000 videos and stories, and they've got all the technique down. And so for me, I started making it as relevant to for what I'm building, in the sense that like I photograph it this way, or I'm thinking this, but that doesn't mean my way is the right way. But that being said, is this is a way to do how or this is what I'm thinking through. And by the way, don't forget to do this stuff, or don't. And so that's always been kind of a motto for me going forward. Like, okay, here are other things to think about and consider in essentially 5 to 8 minute kind of bite-sized chunks. And I try to bring a little bit of my joy and excitement and passion for art and photography into the Karjaka and coffee.
Mm.
I guess my parting message would be like, be okay with being bad. You want to be the next graphic designer or next fashion designer, go out and do it. But like celebrate where you are now and where you were then and your development. I think we get so wrapped up into the judgment side of things, and I don't want this to sound like some Tony Robbins thing, where just like, it's a rah rah thing. But really, like, I'm still that kid where my father gave me a camera. Like, here's a camera, go. It's like, I don't know. It's just like, doesn't matter. You're gonna learn. Like just keep fail, fall. Like, if there was like a fly on the wall in my life, it is just a series of me just tripping on my own feet all day long, with projects or people, or like, oh, I should have said this, I didn't do that. Just like, and like I've got all these bruises, and the hardest thing is just like you just get up,
Just keep going.
keep going.
Well, yeah, people say this kind of thing over and over, but it's always nice to hear it again. And that's very well said. And yeah, I just want to thank you for being here
Oh
and
my God.
sharing your wisdom and yeah, I'm all fired up to conquer the world now.
Thank you
So.
for